Stop reading. You just started the countdown. The words cut through the applause so suddenly that every conversation inside the grand hall of the Orion Academy stopped at once. My name is Commander Lysera Thane, Senior Instructor of Military Linguistics, and until that moment I believed no civilization understood ancient languages better than we did. For nearly 200 years, the greatest scholars from across the Galactic Union had dedicated their lives to translating a stone tablet recovered from a forgotten world orbiting a dying star. The inscription was estimated to be over 10,000 years old, older than many modern civilizations, and every respected expert agreed we were finally about to unlock its greatest secret. Standing quietly near the back of the audience was our newest exchange student from Earth. Nathan Reed looked completely ordinary. He was a white human male in his late 20s wearing the standard dark academy uniform with silver trim, his expression calm, while everyone around him celebrated what they believed was a historic victory. No one expected the human to contribute anything meaningful. Humanity had only recently earned a place among the major interstellar powers, and although they had a reputation for creativity, ancient galactic linguistics had always been considered far beyond their experience. Professor Aldrin activated the final translation sequence, and brilliant golden symbols floated above the weathered stone. The Academy translation system confidently displayed a welcoming message as hundreds of students applauded. Nathan quietly sighed. Then he spoke the sentence that erased every smile in the room. That is not a welcome message. It is the first line of an activation protocol. Laughter spread through the audience. Cadet Varek Sol immediately stepped forward, folding his arms with obvious amusement. The human thinks he knows more than scholars who spent generations studying this artifact. Nathan did not argue. He simply looked at the tiny symbol near the bottom of the projection that everyone else had ignored. You translated the words, he said calmly. You ignored the pause. Before Professor Aldrin could respond, the ancient tablet answered for itself. Every light inside the academy dimmed simultaneously. The floating translation disappeared, replaced by crimson symbols that no academy database recognized. A deep harmonic tone echoed through the enormous chamber as the floor vibrated beneath our feet. Above the stone, unfamiliar characters rearranged themselves before translating without assistance. Archive countdown initiated. 60 minutes remaining. The applause vanished instantly. Security officers rushed toward the artifact while emergency barriers sealed every exit. Captain Rowan Ellis ordered every defensive system online, yet each command returned the same impossible response. Authorization denied. Cadet Varek smirked at Nathan. Convenient timing. Without waiting for permission, he activated the Academy tactical drones, determined to expose the human as a fraud through a standard command simulation. 12 advanced training drones lifted into formation around the chamber and locked onto Nathan's position. The Academy computer instructed Varek to issue ancient command phrases according to the official translation. He spoke confidently. Nothing happened. He repeated the sequence with perfect pronunciation. The drones remained motionless. Nathan slowly stepped forward, speaking only 4 quiet words in the forgotten language. Every drone instantly turned away from him, lowered their scanning arrays, and repositioned themselves in perfect formation facing the ancient tablet instead. A new line of glowing symbols appeared above the countdown before translating itself into flawless galactic standard. Returning Instructor recognized. Lesson preparation complete. Every person in the chamber stared at Nathan Reed. For the first time in my career, I realized we had not discovered an ancient language. The ancient language had just identified a human. 58 minutes remained when the ancient tablet released a soft pulse of light that swept across the entire grand hall without harming a single person. Every academy display immediately switched to the same crimson symbols, while our translation system struggled to interpret even a single line. Captain Rowan Ellis ordered the security teams to isolate the artifact, but every containment field shut itself down the instant it came within a few feet of the stone. The Academy had prepared for sabotage, theft, and system failure. None of us had prepared for the possibility that the artifact itself could reject our authority. Nathan Reed remained perfectly calm while everyone else rushed from one control station to another. Professor Aldrin finally stepped toward him, his confidence noticeably fading. If you truly understand what this is, explain why the system recognized you. Nathan looked at the floating symbols instead of the professor. It did not recognize me, he answered quietly. It recognized my answer. That sentence only created more confusion. Cadet Varexol laughed and shook his head. You expect us to believe an artifact waited 10,000 years for a human student to guess the correct phrase? Nathan slowly turned toward him. No, I think it waited for someone to stop translating individual words. Before anyone could respond, another line appeared above the countdown. Every Academy translation engine immediately produced a different interpretation. One display labeled it an emergency warning. Another called it an access request. A third insisted it was an ancient military challenge. Nathan glanced at the competing translations for only a second before quietly saying, "All of them are wrong." Professor Aldrin frowned. Then what does it actually say? Nathan pointed towards several empty spaces between the glowing symbols. You keep reading the marks. This language also uses silence. The spaces carry instructions. Several instructors immediately enlarged the projection, searching for hidden punctuation they had ignored for generations. None of them had ever considered that the distance between symbols might be part of the language itself. Captain Ellis decided not to wait any longer. He activated a squad of advanced Academy Guardian drones and ordered them to secure the chamber before the countdown reached another milestone. The drones accelerated toward the artifact with flawless precision. They stopped less than 6 feet away. For Ancient Guardian, machines silently emerged from hidden compartments beneath the floor and positioned themselves between the modern drones and the stone tablet. Neither side advanced. Neither side showed aggression. They simply waited. Nathan quietly observed the formation before speaking another short sentence in the forgotten language. Instantly, the Ancient Guardians rotated 90 degrees and created an open corridor leading directly toward the tablet. At the same time, every Academy drone powered down its tactical posture and shifted into an escort formation instead. Captain Ellis stared at his command console in disbelief. They just ignored every security protocol. Nathan gently shook his head. They corrected your priority. Another translation appeared without assistance. Instruction takes precedence over defense. Educational authority confirmed. Cadet Varek refused to accept what he was witnessing. He stepped into the newly opened corridor before Nathan could move, determined to prove the human was manipulating the system somehow. The moment his foot crossed the first illuminated marker, the entire passage disappeared beneath him and quietly returned him to his original position without injury. The chamber seemed almost polite in rejecting him. Nathan walked forward next. A path of white light formed beneath each step only after he committed to moving. At the end of the corridor, the stone tablet slowly rotated, revealing a hidden staircase descending into darkness. New symbols appeared above the entrance before translating themselves into flawless galactic standard. Lesson 1 awaits below. Authorized instructor required. 56 minutes remaining. The staircase descended far deeper than the Academy blueprints claimed was physically possible, and with every step the walls changed from polished alloy to smooth black stone covered with countless ancient symbols that shimmered like distant stars. The air grew noticeably cooler, yet nothing felt abandoned. It felt prepared. I followed several steps behind Nathan Reed with Captain Rowan Ellis, Professor Aldrin, and a small security team close behind us. No one spoke because every sound echoed through the enormous passage, as though the structure itself were listening. The countdown continued floating silently above us, now showing 54 minutes remaining, but Nathan never looked at it. Instead, he studied the walls with quiet concentration, occasionally slowing for only a moment before continuing forward with complete confidence. We eventually entered a chamber so vast that its ceiling disappeared into darkness. Thousands of crystalline columns stretched across the room in perfect rows, each supporting floating symbols that drifted through the air like glowing pages from invisible books. At the center stood a circular platform surrounded by pathways made entirely of light. There were dozens of possible routes, and every few seconds the glowing paths shifted into new patterns. Professor Aldrin immediately activated a mapping drone, believing the changing layout could be analyzed mathematically. The drone barely crossed the edge of the platform before every illuminated pathway rearranged itself again, erasing the route completely. Captain Ellis launched 3 additional reconnaissance units, but each received different navigation data until they quietly returned to their starting positions, unable to advance. The chamber was not reacting to machines. It was reacting to decisions. Cadet Varek's soul stepped onto the nearest glowing path before anyone could stop him. The route remained stable for exactly 3 steps before splitting into dozens of identical directions. He confidently chose one. The light beneath him slowly faded, leaving him standing on an isolated platform while every surrounding bridge vanished without warning. He was neither trapped nor threatened. He had simply chosen incorrectly. Nathan watched for several silent seconds before taking his first step onto an entirely different path that none of us had even noticed. His route did not remain fixed. Instead, each new section appeared only after he committed to moving forward, almost as though the chamber rewarded confidence rather than calculation. Professor Aldrin hurriedly compared Nathan's movement to every recorded translation of the ancient language. Nothing matched. "How are you predicting the correct route?" he asked. Nathan smiled faintly without slowing his pace. "I am not predicting anything. I stopped treating this like a maze." Those words made no sense until he pointed toward the floating symbols drifting above the chamber. "This is a sentence," he explained calmly. "Every path is punctuation." I looked upward again, and for the first time the arrangement no longer resembled random architecture. The glowing bridges separated ideas the way pauses separated thoughts during conversation. Nathan was not solving a puzzle. He was reading an idea that stretched across an entire room. As he reached the center platform, every floating symbol suddenly froze in place. A warm white light spread across the chamber, replacing the cold crimson glow that had surrounded us since the countdown began. The crystalline columns brightened one by one until the entire underground archive shimmered with quiet brilliance. Then a voice unlike any translation program echoed through the chamber. It was calm, unmistakably human, and carried the steady confidence of someone welcoming an old colleague rather than greeting strangers. "Welcome back, instructor. Lesson 1 has been accepted. Classroom configuration complete." Every member of the academy stood frozen in stunned silence. We had believed we were exploring the remains of a forgotten civilization. At that moment, I realized something far more unsettling. This place had never been waiting for archaeologists. It had been waiting for a teacher to return. The human voice faded, but the silence that followed felt even heavier because none of us could explain what we had just heard. The chamber did not resemble an archive anymore. It resembled a classroom waiting for its students to take their seats. The glowing columns shifted smoothly into concentric circles around the central platform, and dozens of crystalline spheres rose from the floor until they hovered at eye level. Each sphere projected a different tactical scenario across the air, displaying fleets, planetary defenses, evacuation corridors, and diplomatic routes that evolved every few seconds. The countdown continued without emotion. 51 minutes remained. I expected another translation challenge. Instead, a new sentence appeared above the room in flawless galactic standard. Lesson 2. Language is movement. Demonstrate understanding. Before anyone could react, one of the floating spheres expanded into a full tactical simulation surrounding the entire chamber. We suddenly found ourselves standing inside the projection of a crowded orbital station where thousands of civilian transport routes crossed military patrol lanes. Professor Aldrin immediately identified it as a strategic command exercise. Captain Rowan Ellis smiled with renewed confidence because tactical simulations were the Academy's greatest strength. He stepped onto the instructor platform and issued commands using the official translation database. Defensive formations appeared exactly as ordered, but within seconds the simulated civilian traffic collapsed into complete disorder. Warning indicators filled the projection until the exercise declared mission failure. Cadet Varek's soul quickly volunteered to prove the Academy could still solve the challenge. He selected a more aggressive defensive pattern, directing patrol groups to secure every major approach. The result looked impressive for several moments before the simulation quietly displayed another failure. The station remained protected, yet commerce had stopped, rescue corridors had disappeared, and the exercise concluded that the objective had been misunderstood. Varek stepped away in frustration. Nathan had remained silent through both attempts. He slowly approached the platform and studied the floating symbols rather than the simulation itself. "You are reading the commands," he said calmly. "You are ignoring who they are speaking to." Professor Aldrin frowned. "Commands do not change based on the listener." Nathan looked at him with surprising patience. "Good teachers do." He placed one hand above the central console without touching it and quietly spoke several phrases in the ancient language. None of the words sounded forceful. They sounded almost conversational. The tactical display immediately transformed. Instead of commanding military units first, the simulation reorganized transportation. Schedules, emergency services, maintenance drones, and communication relays. Only after every civilian route stabilized did the defensive fleet reposition itself automatically into stronger formations than either previous attempt had produced. Every projected threat disappeared without a single direct confrontation because the system had anticipated them before they became problems. Brilliant white light swept across the chamber as every crystalline sphere synchronized with Nathan's solution. A calm tone echoed once more through the underground classroom. Evaluation complete. Instruction accepted. Tactical literacy confirmed. Captain Ellis stared at the display with open disbelief. The military response was secondary. Nathan nodded. The language was never designed to control soldiers. It was designed to teach people how to think before they needed soldiers. As the final tactical projection dissolved, an enormous wall at the far end of the chamber silently separated into two halves. Beyond it stretched an immense hall lined with thousands of illuminated shelves containing objects, tablets, and recording crystals unlike anything preserved in the Galactic Union archives. Above the entrance, fresh symbols assembled themselves into a message that no translation engine attempted to interpret, because this time every person present already understood what mattered most. The archive was not measuring intelligence. It was measuring wisdom, and somehow the quiet human from Earth continued answering questions the rest of us had never realized we were being asked. The newly opened hall stretched so far into the distance that even the Academy scanners could not measure its full length. Every shelf contained artifacts preserved with impossible precision, from crystal memory cores to metallic tablets engraved with the same elegant symbols Nathan Reed seemed to understand instinctively. Yet nothing in the chamber appeared locked away. Everything appeared organized for students who were expected to return. The countdown continued above us with 47 minutes remaining, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Fear was slowly giving way to curiosity. As we entered the archive, thousands of tiny lights awakened one after another, illuminating displays that had remained dark for 10,000 years. Each artifact projected a brief lesson before fading and waiting for someone to continue. Professor Aldrin eagerly approached the nearest display, only to watch it dim the moment he reached toward it. Captain Rowan Ellis attempted another, but the same thing happened. Every exhibit quietly entered a dormant state whenever someone tried to activate it directly. Nathan walked past several displays without touching them. One by one they illuminated behind him, as though recognizing his presence rather than responding to deliberate commands. I could no longer dismiss the pattern as coincidence. The archive was making choices. Suddenly, every light in the chamber converged toward a circular platform at the center of the room. A transparent sphere rose slowly from beneath the floor, carrying what appeared to be a simple notebook bound in dark material that showed almost no sign of age. There were no locks, no protective fields, and no visible technology surrounding it. Above the notebook, ancient symbols assembled into a single sentence before translating themselves into galactic standard. Continue the lesson. Professor Aldrin instinctively stepped forward, but the sphere remained sealed. Captain Ellis tried next with equal confidence. Nothing changed. Cadet Varek Sol attempted to issue commands using every approved Academy translation protocol. The notebook did not react. Nathan approached quietly without speaking. He looked at the notebook for several seconds before gently asking, in the forgotten language, what sounded less like a command and more like a respectful question. The transparent sphere immediately dissolved into countless particles of light and disappeared. The notebook opened by itself. Instead of written pages, each sheet reflected moving images of classrooms scattered across ancient worlds. Different species sat together while human instructors patiently explained ideas through symbols, demonstrations, and conversation rather than authority. There were no conquerors. There were no prisoners. There were only teachers and students. The entire archive brightened as if acknowledging that the correct lesson had finally resumed. Professor Aldrin whispered in disbelief. This was never a military archive. Nathan slowly turned another page. No, he answered. The military learned here. Before anyone could ask another question, emergency alerts suddenly echoed through the Academy communication network above us. The Galactic Council had detected the activation of the ancient archive and remotely issued a containment directive. Security authorization across the Academy instantly transferred to Council control. Heavy access doors throughout the underground complex began sealing one after another in an effort to isolate every chamber. Captain Ellis reached for his command console, but every override request was rejected. Nathan calmly placed the notebook back onto the platform and quietly spoke another short sentence in the ancient language. Every sealing door immediately stopped moving. The Council lockout vanished from every display, replaced by a simple message generated by the archive itself. Educational session in progress. External authority temporarily suspended. For the second time that day, the most advanced command systems in known space had yielded without resistance, and every one of them had chosen the human over the institutions that believed they controlled the galaxy. 43 minutes remained when the archive quietly changed once again. The shelves around us folded into the walls without a sound, revealing a circular chamber surrounded by 6 floating platforms. Above each platform hovered a different constellation of ancient symbols, and beneath every constellation appeared a living simulation of a crisis unfolding somewhere across the galaxy. One showed a colony losing communication during a violent stellar storm. Another displayed a convoy trapped between collapsing jump routes. A third revealed an orbital habitat struggling to balance limited power between life support and navigation. None of the situations involved enemies. Every challenge demanded judgment instead of force. A clear message formed across the center of the chamber. Lesson 3. Every solution creates another question. Demonstrate understanding. Captain Rowan Ellis immediately recognized the scenarios as advanced command evaluations and stepped onto the nearest platform with complete confidence. He selected the fastest evacuation route available, believing speed would protect the greatest number of civilians. The simulation completed within seconds before calmly displaying a single sentence. Acceptable decision. Long-term stability failed. The projection faded. Professor Aldrin attempted the second platform, focusing on preserving scientific data before infrastructure. His reasoning was logical, but the lesson ended with another quiet evaluation. Valuable knowledge preserved. Community resilience failed. One by one, experienced officers and respected scholars presented answers supported by decades of education, and one by one the archive acknowledged their effort before revealing a consequence they had overlooked. There was no punishment, only another opportunity to learn. Nathan Reed remained silent until every platform except one had been attempted. He slowly approached the final scenario where a remote frontier settlement faced simultaneous shortages of energy, transportation, and communication after a chain of natural failures. The Academy observers expected him to choose the most efficient technical solution. Instead, Nathan asked a question in the ancient language. The simulation immediately expanded, revealing details no one else had been allowed to see. Hidden supply routes appeared beneath the terrain. Volunteer maintenance teams became visible inside nearby communities. Unused communication relays activated across neighboring systems. Nathan smiled slightly. The lesson was incomplete because we never asked who else could help. He rearranged responsibilities instead of resources. The settlement stabilized without exhausting its emergency reserves because every nearby community contributed a small portion of its own capacity. The archive illuminated the entire chamber with warm white light, as every unfinished scenario automatically corrected itself using the same principle. A gentle voice echoed through the room once again. Instruction. Accepted. Cooperation exceeds optimization. Captain Ellis lowered his command tablet and quietly admitted, "We kept solving the problem in front of us." Nathan nodded. The language teaches relationships before answers. At that exact moment, urgent notifications appeared across every Academy display. Multiple Galactic Council observation vessels had entered orbit around the Academy, determined to secure the awakened archive before anyone else could claim it. Remote authorization requests flooded every system, demanding immediate access. Ancient Guardian units emerged from hidden chambers throughout the complex and formed precise defensive positions. But instead of preparing for conflict, they projected glowing pathways leading toward observation galleries overlooking the classroom. Nathan looked at the formations and softly translated the newest inscription before anyone else could attempt it. Visitors may observe. They may not interrupt the lesson. Every Guardian immediately lowered its defensive posture, while every council access request remained politely declined. Once again, the archive demonstrated that true authority did not come from rank, technology, or power. It belonged to the one who understood what the lesson was really trying to teach. 38 minutes remained when the glowing pathways surrounding the classroom slowly faded into a single beam of light that reached toward the highest point of the underground archive. Every crystalline column rotated in perfect synchronization until they formed what appeared to be an enormous three-dimensional star map suspended above us. At first it looked like nothing more than a detailed chart of explored space, but then entire regions shifted into new positions, revealing layers hidden beneath the familiar constellations. I recognized every major member world of the Galactic Union. They had all been carefully marked with symbols representing schools, research centers, and diplomatic academies. Yet one location outshone every other point on the map. A small blue world near the edge of an unremarkable spiral arm radiated with thousands of interconnected lines that extended across the entire projection. Earth. Professor Aldrin stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. That cannot be correct. Every historical record places humanity among the youngest spacefaring civilizations. Nathan Reed studied the map without the slightest sign of surprise. Young does not always mean new. Before anyone could ask another question, the projection expanded again, replacing stars with moving images recorded thousands of years earlier. We watched countless civilizations gathered inside classrooms remarkably similar to the one surrounding us. Human instructors stood beside alien scholars, not issuing orders, but asking questions, encouraging discussion, and guiding discoveries that would eventually shape entire worlds. There were no banners of conquest, no celebrations of victory, and no displays of dominance. The foundation of the ancient network had always been education. The realization struck me harder than any military revelation could have. Everything our civilization admired had been built upon lessons we never knew had been taught. Suddenly, the archive detected new arrivals above the academy. The Galactic Council observation vessels had deployed autonomous inspection drones into the underground complex despite repeated denials of access. Their formation advanced through maintenance corridors, attempting to bypass the archive's invitations and establish independent control. Captain Rowan Ellis immediately requested permission to intercept them, but before he could organize a response, the ancient guardians calmly repositioned themselves throughout the chamber. Their movements were precise, coordinated, and completely non-aggressive. Nathan quietly observed the approaching drone formations displayed on a floating tactical projection. "They are treating this like a facility," he said. "It is still a classroom." He spoke another brief sentence in the ancient language. Instantly, every glowing corridor inside the archive rearranged itself. The inspection drones continued moving exactly as programmed, yet each turn gently redirected them away from restricted chambers and toward elevated observation galleries overlooking the lesson in progress. Their sensors remained fully operational. Their communications continued uninterrupted, and every recording reached the council without interference. They had not been defeated through force. They had simply been guided into becoming respectful observers instead of uninvited participants. A new evaluation appeared above the star map. Conflict resolved without denying understanding. Highest instructional outcome achieved. Even Captain Ellis smiled as he lowered his command console. "You won without blocking them." Nathan answered with the same calm certainty he had shown since the countdown began. "If they leave having learned something, everyone wins." The archive responded immediately. The star map brightened until every pathway connecting Earth to distant civilizations glowed with brilliant white light. Then another hidden layer emerged beneath the first, revealing thousands of inactive academies scattered across the galaxy. each linked to the same educational network waiting to awaken. A final message slowly assembled across the projection while every person in the chamber watched in complete silence. Instructor verified. Regional Learning Network ready for restoration. 36 minutes remaining. 32 minutes remained when the entire underground archive grew perfectly still. The glowing star map dissolved into countless streams of light that flowed toward the center of the chamber, gathering above a circular platform that had remained empty since we first entered the ancient classroom. One by one the streams combined until they formed translucent figures standing shoulder to shoulder around Nathan Reed. They were unmistakably human. Some appeared young, others older, each wearing simple teaching robes instead of military uniforms or ceremonial clothing. None of them carried symbols of power. They carried books, tablets, and teaching instruments. Their expressions reflected patience rather than authority. The archive had not restored rulers. It had restored instructors. Every observer inside the chamber instinctively fell silent. Even the Galactic Council representatives watching through the observation galleries remained motionless as the projections slowly came to life. The nearest instructor smiled warmly before speaking in the forgotten language. Nathan listened for several seconds before answering with complete confidence. The exchange sounded natural, almost effortless, like two colleagues continuing a conversation that had only paused yesterday instead of 10,000 years ago. Professor Aldrin could barely contain his astonishment. He is speaking without translating. I realized he was correct. Nathan was no longer decoding the language. He was thinking in it. The human instructor turned toward all of us, and the archive instantly provided a flawless translation. Knowledge survives only when it is shared freely. The sentence echoed throughout the chamber, followed by hundreds of similar voices repeating lessons recorded across countless generations. Every projection presented a different classroom where human teachers worked alongside alien students representing civilizations that still existed today. The similarities were impossible to ignore. Our scientific methods, diplomatic traditions, and academy structures all reflected principles that had originated here long before our own recorded history began. Captain Rowan Ellis quietly lowered his eyes. Everything we believed we invented. Nathan finished the thought for him. Someone first taught it. At that moment, the observation galleries reported unexpected activity. Several council officials had requested exclusive administrative authority over the restored educational network, arguing that centralized oversight would protect such an important discovery. The request appeared across the archive in the form of a formal authorization challenge. Every person in the chamber waited for Nathan's response. Instead of rejecting the proposal, he calmly reviewed the ancient symbols for several moments before entering a different answer entirely. Access belongs to every student willing to learn, he said in the forgotten language. The archive processed the statement. A brief silence followed before every crystal projection brightened simultaneously. Administrative request respectfully declined. Distributed educational access confirmed. Shared stewardship accepted. Instantly, the authorization structure reorganized itself. No government, military, or individual received exclusive control. Instead, every accredited academy connected to the network received equal educational access under the archive's original principles. The council observers could still study everything. They simply could not own it. Captain Ellis smiled with genuine admiration. You defeated the proposal without excluding anyone. Nathan looked at the surrounding instructors as their projections slowly nodded in quiet approval. A classroom stops being a classroom the moment knowledge belongs to only one person. The human figures gradually dissolved into streams of light once again, but before disappearing completely, they all turned toward Nathan with the same respectful gesture. Then the archive revealed one final doorway hidden behind the central platform. Brilliant white light poured through the opening while a calm voice echoed across the chamber. Final lesson prepared. Instructor presence confirmed. 29 minutes remaining. 25 minutes remained as Nathan Reed stepped through the final doorway, and every light within the ancient archive quietly followed him. Beyond the entrance lay a circular chamber unlike any classroom or library we had seen before. There were no shelves, no projections, and no symbols covering the walls. At the center rested a single crystalline pedestal surrounded by empty space. It was almost disappointingly simple until I realized the room itself was responding to our thoughts. Every expectation we carried seemed to fade the moment we entered, leaving only silence and clarity. Nathan approached the pedestal while the rest of us remained several feet behind. Above it, the final inscription slowly appeared in the forgotten language before translating itself without hesitation. Final lesson. A teacher does not preserve knowledge. A teacher creates those who will preserve it. The words lingered in the air as the countdown reached exactly 24 minutes. I expected another impossible examination, another challenge that only Nathan could complete. Instead, the pedestal remained inactive. Nothing happened. Professor Aldrin looked toward Nathan with growing confusion. What are you waiting for? Nathan smiled gently. It is waiting for all of us. He stepped away from the pedestal instead of toward it. That single decision changed everything. The chamber brightened as though the archive had been waiting for someone to refuse exclusive recognition. Every member of our group received a small sphere of white light floating quietly before them. Mine settled into my hands with surprising warmth. Around the observation galleries above us, the Galactic Council delegates received identical lights. Even the Academy security officers and students standing at the edges of the chamber found the same silent gift waiting for them. Nathan had not accepted the final lesson alone. He had invited everyone into it. The archive responded immediately. Throughout the galaxy, thousands of dormant Academy nodes shown earlier on the hidden star map awakened one after another. Observation feeds arriving from the Council vessels confirmed the impossible. Ancient educational centers on distant worlds were activating peacefully, opening their doors after 10,000 years without a single emergency signal or defensive response. Every restored facility transmitted the same simple greeting. Welcome, students. Captain Rowan Ellis slowly lowered his command console because there was no longer anything to command. Professor Aldrin quietly closed his translation database because it had become unnecessary. We were no longer trying to force meaning from forgotten symbols. We finally understood their purpose. Nathan placed his hand lightly upon the crystalline pedestal, not to claim ownership, but to acknowledge the lesson. The final evaluation appeared above the chamber in brilliant white letters. Countdown concluded. Educational network restored. Instruction successfully continued. At that exact moment, the timer vanished forever. There was no explosion, no hidden weapon, no catastrophic revelation. Only thousands of new connections spreading across the galaxy as classrooms, libraries, and research centers welcomed learners once more. I had spent my entire career believing humanity had stumbled into greatness through determination and luck. I was completely wrong. We had mistaken humility for weakness because the greatest teachers never demanded recognition. They simply ensured that others became wiser than they had been before. As I watched Nathan Reed quietly step away from the pedestal without asking for authority, reward, or celebration, I finally understood why the ancient language had recognized him instantly. It had never been searching for the smartest person in the room. It had been waiting for someone who still remembered that knowledge achieves its greatest purpose only when it is shared. And in that unforgettable moment, the entire galaxy learned that humanity had never disappeared from history. Humanity had simply been waiting for its students to be ready.